Have you ever stopped to consider that the greatest spiritual dangers don't always lie in life's turbulent beginnings, but rather in its seemingly peaceful endings? When the rush of life slows down, the children have gone their own way, and routines become predictable. It's easy to believe the hardest part is behind you, but this is exactly where many stumble, because the danger isn't in the lack of time, but in the false sense that there's nothing left to fight for. The soul begins to quiet, the eyes turn more to the past than upward, and if not awakened, faith can silently drift into sleep. Billy Graham, with his unwavering wisdom, often said that aging is a gift, but also a battlefield. Faith can become automatic. Passion may give way to apathy, and hope, if not nurtured, can yield to discouragement. The enemy knows this. He doesn't need to destroy someone who has walked closely with God for years. He only needs to distract them, enough to dull their spiritual alertness. This video is both a warning and an invitation, a call for you to awaken, because the time you're living now could be the most fruitful, the most impactful, and the most spiritually powerful season of your life. But to walk in it, you must understand the battles of this stage and how to face them with wisdom, discernment, and a living faith. May this message reach your heart and reignite the flame within. As the years pass, something sacred begins to blossom in the heart of those who walk with God: spiritual discernment. While the world demands easy smiles and compromise in the name of peace, maturity teaches us that not every silence is wise, and not every kindness is a virtue. There are moments when the soul must stand firm, even if that means defying expectations. At this stage of life, the walk of faith becomes clearer, more grounded. It's no longer about pleasing others, it's about standing firm. Many confuse spiritual growth with emotional flexibility, but in truth, a unique strength is reserved for those who have reached this harvest season. Spiritual maturity is not passivity, it is clarity. A man or woman who has faced spiritual battles knows that yielding out of fear of displeasing others can be the first step toward compromising their spiritual protection. It is precisely at this point in the journey that God calls for a firm and loving stance, even when it goes against the cultural tide. It's in this season of life that convictions become solid and faith deepens. Decisions are no longer driven by vanity or the need for approval, but by purpose and reverence. As it is written, "The righteous will flourish like a palm tree, they will grow like a cedar of Lebanon." Psalm 92-12. Even when the body's eyes grow weary, the eyes of the soul see more clearly than ever. And it is right here that the true calling begins, to protect your purpose with more wisdom than ever before. Reaching maturity is not just a biological milestone, it's a spiritual responsibility. At this stage, the enemy's attacks become more subtle, seemingly harmless invitations, friendships lacking purpose, connections born out of a fear of loneliness. A sensitive heart without vigilance can be manipulated in the name of kindness. That's why those who have walked with God for a long time must double their spiritual guard. Setting boundaries isn't a sign of coldness, but of spiritual wisdom. Walking in faith doesn't mean being accessible to everything and everyone. It means being faithful to the purpose. It's not about living rigidly, but with intention. There's power in discerning what builds up and what drains, what honors the journey and what weakens faith. As Proverbs 4:23 says, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." In the later years of life, each decision carries more weight, and every concession a deeper impact. A toxic friendship can dim a light that's been cultivated for decades. A relationship without purpose can drain your strength in maturity. That's why it's time to guard with care what God has entrusted to you, your inner peace, your divine purpose, and the mission that is still alive within you. And this vigilance opens the door to something even greater. Age doesn't reduce your spiritual value, it amplifies it. With the passing of time, spiritual authority becomes more evident, even if the body doesn't have the same energy it once did. What once was anxiety for acceptance now becomes quiet strength. Those who have walked with God for decades carry marks of faith that need no explanation, and this changes everything about how they show up in the world. This authority doesn't demand justification or approval. It's not about obligation, it's about presence. A presence that brings calm, guidance, conviction, and intercession. Those who grow old in faith know that silence can be more powerful than 1,000 speeches. And sometimes, the most spiritual decision you can make is to say no without guilt. There is dignity in not bowing to social pressure, even if others don't understand. In this season of life, value lies more in essence than appearance, and that allows you to live more truthfully. As the Apostle Paul wrote, "That is why for Christ's sake I delight in weaknesses. For when I am weak, then I am strong." In Corinthians 12:10. A physical weakness can carry a spiritual strength that transforms every room it enters. And this quiet strength is the foundation of your next divine calling. There is a kind of holiness that only blossoms over time. It isn't shaped by external rules, but by a deep and continuous inner reverence. In this mature stage of life, God's invitation is to live with clearer, quieter, and yet more intense focus. It's time to filter distractions, to stop apologizing, for guarding your peace and to say no firmly and gently. The call now is to walk with silent authority. It's not about rushing, but about walking with intention. Words carry weight, prayers have reach, and presence leaves impact. There's no longer a need to prove anything. It's time to embody what has been learned. At this point, every gesture becomes a seed of legacy, every decision an echo into eternity. And there is a special power reserved for those who live with this awareness. The power of a spirit that doesn't conform but is transformed, that doesn't run dry but overflows. This phase doesn't mark the end of the journey, it's the height of the mission. And when this mission is guarded with holiness, it becomes a beacon lighting the way for those who follow. With time comes clarity about what truly matters. Spiritual maturity, contrary to what many believe, is not a place of passivity. It is a place of sacred separation. There comes a moment when you realize you can't carry everything or everyone. In His wisdom, God often calls those who've crossed many valleys to a place of intercession, discernment, and consecration. Elijah withdrew. Hannah fasted in silence. Paul wrote letters from prison. It wasn't isolation, it was purpose. When the soul becomes more sensitive to God's presence, it also becomes less tolerant of shallow distractions. There's a subtle, almost imperceptible invitation to a more reserved, yet deeply fruitful life. The noise of the world no longer enchants as it once did. There is a call to a kind of holiness that separates, not to exclude, but to deepen intimacy with God. This is not rejection, it's redirection. Spiritual maturity calls for this brave step. Those who have grown spiritually know their hearts can't remain open to everything or everyone. The walk of faith requires focus. What once felt normal, family drama, small gossip, relationships, of convenience, now feels heavy. It's not arrogance, it's spiritual wisdom. Maturity doesn't need to explain itself. It walks in quiet authority, knowing it has been set apart, not to hide, but to impact with truth, discernment, and love that corrects. You've already paid a high price for what you carry. That includes tears, silent waiting, and spiritual battles fought with no one watching. At this stage in life, guarding your calling is more than a necessity. It's an act of obedience. It's not pride, it's stewardship. Jesus, the greatest example of love, also knew how to set clear boundaries. He healed crowds, yet often withdrew to be alone with the Father. Spiritual care means learning to say no without guilt. Loving someone doesn't mean giving them unlimited access to your life. Some confuse kindness with weakness, but spiritual maturity teaches us that firmness is also an expression of love. Prayer at this stage is a daily decision, not as escape, but as strategy. By discerning what comes from God and what merely drains you, you honor your mission and preserve your anointing. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Proverbs 4:23. These ancient words remain true. Guarding your heart also means protecting your peace, your time, and your purpose. Setting limits isn't a lack of empathy, it's faithfulness to your calling. After all, the enemy doesn't need to destroy you, he just needs to distract you. But you know your mission requires clarity, and your spiritual health depends on vigilance. The presence of someone who has walked with God for decades carries a weight that the spiritual realm recognizes. That kind of authority isn't built overnight. It's forged in silence, losses, and long-standing faithfulness. You're not here to entertain, but to lead. Not to stay quiet in the face of injustice, but to speak with grace and courage. Your voice holds years of prayer. Your vision sees beyond the surface. This is not passive maturity. It's deeply rooted conviction. It is possible to be kind and firm, to be loving while setting clear boundaries. Jesus did this perfectly. He welcomed sinners, but he never excused sin. Spiritual maturity calls for that kind of courage, to love without compromising truth. When you speak with spiritual wisdom, you're nourishing thirsty hearts, even if some resist. The world doesn't need more opinions. It needs voices that speak from the mountaintop of experience. The journey of faith in your later years isn't a dimming light. It's an internal ignition. The fire inside you is not nostalgia, it's calling. There are still things to be said, warnings to give, prayers to offer. What the world calls the end, God calls ascending. And when he sends, it's never to just any place, it's to the places few dare to go. Your mission is not over. In fact, it may just be reaching its highest point. The final chapters of a well-written story are always the most powerful, and with God, it's no different. Spiritual maturity is not retirement, it is refined activation. You are not being forgotten, you are being set apart. The challenges you face today are not setbacks, but tests of authority. And the clarity you now carry is a rare gift. Those who've endured storms learn to sense the sky before the rain falls. There is power in your voice that must not be underestimated. They will still bear fruit in old age, they will stay fresh and green. Psalm 92:14. This promise is not just poetic, it's real. You're not becoming weak. You are becoming more discerning, that's wisdom. It's not about saying more, but about speaking with weight. There is something in you the enemy fears, which is why he tries to silence your influence. But this is your time to rise, even in silence, with authority. Speak with boldness, but speak with discernment. You no longer need human approval when you already walk with God's endorsement. Even if some of your steps feel solitary, you are walking with clarity. And that clarity is like light in a dark night for those around you. Children, grandchildren, friends, and neighbors are watching how you live, and your maturity teaches more than 1,000 sermons. They don't need more noise. They need a reference point, and you are it. As spiritual sensitivity grows with time, so does the responsibility to choose your relationships wisely. Not every affection is healthy. There are kindnesses that mask, selfish intentions and smiles that conceal manipulation. Those walking in faith and growing older must develop not just love, but discernment. Loving someone from a distance is not coldness, it is spiritual protection. Spiritual warfare isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it takes place through small moments, casual conversations, unwise decisions, or subtle access to your inner world. And that's where the danger lies, allowing unprepared people to touch delicate areas of your soul. Spiritual wisdom teaches you to guard your peace. That may mean declining invitations, changing habits, or even redefining emotional ties. To maintain a healthy spiritual life, you must understand that your anointing is not public, it is sacred. Some things are not meant to be shared with everyone. Your dreams, prophetic insights, and personal battles need a safe environment. And that's something only maturity brings. Those who carry something valuable inside learn to protect it, not out of guilt, but with confidence and prayer. Holiness was never about perfection, it's about separation. And setting yourself apart is not arrogance, it's reverence. Just as the Ark of the Covenant could only be carried by consecrated priests, your spiritual life also requires pure hands and sacred space. What you carry cannot be treated casually, and if someone doesn't understand that, perhaps they are not yet ready to walk alongside you with maturity. Protecting what is sacred takes courage. It's easier to blend in than to take a stand, but you weren't called to dim your light, you were called to intensify it. There will be moments when you need to say no to seemingly harmless invitations that are actually distractions. Some places no longer align with who you've become. That's not bitterness, it's heavenly alignment. The spiritual challenge is to uphold holiness while staying engaged with the world, without being tainted by it. Those who choose to live with spiritual maturity find a precious balance, to be among people without being shaped by them. That's where your life shines, not by force but through consecration. Because what you carry is far too precious to be displayed in public showcases. Maturity brings with it a kind of authority that doesn't shout, but transforms. The years spent in God's presence leave more than wisdom. They leave spiritual weight. Younger people can sense when they're in the presence of someone who has history with heaven. It's like walking into a room that carries peace even in silence. That kind of authority doesn't require titles. It flows from silent faithfulness and prayers whispered in secret. Faith sustained through years of walking with God is more contagious than eloquent speeches. The righteous will flourish like a palm tree. They will still bear fruit in old age. Psalm 92:12-14. This is not religious poetry, it's a living truth. If you're still breathing, your mission is still alive. But to live it out, you must reject superficial commitments, routine faith, and spiritual distractions. You can't live on autopilot. Faith demands action and vigilance. You are not here by accident. Your role in the spiritual house is like that of sturdy pillars. They support without seeking attention. Your presence, your story, your counsel, they all build up others. And if you sometimes feel forgotten, know this: God never overlooks those he trained in silence. Your maturity is heaven's answer to shallow times. Truth doesn't always please, but it always sets free. In a time of moral relativism, staying faithful to the gospel might seem radical. But it's not about being harsh, it's about being whole. True love corrects, warns, disciplines. Those who love speak, and those with discernment don't trade their faith for acceptance. Today's greatest spiritual danger isn't always blatant sin, but silent agreements with lies. God's truth cannot be reshaped to fit the world. It is firm, clear, and sacred. The Apostle Paul warned, "Preach the word. Be prepared in season and out of season. Correct, rebuke, and encourage with great patience and careful instruction." 2 Timothy 4:2. That charge wasn't just for young pastors. It was for anyone who takes faith seriously. Spiritual urgency isn't emotionalism. It's a response to the times we live in. A genuine walk of faith requires clarity about what cannot be compromised. Living a spiritually healthy life in this season means keeping your eyes on purpose, not performance. Spiritual maturity rejects easy applause and chooses difficult faithfulness. Your authority comes from heaven, not popularity. And even if few notice, heaven is already moving because of your prayers, your posture, and your silent strength. You've made it this far because on some level you know there's more purpose, more discernment, more spiritual health waiting for you. But let me ask you this: how many times have you felt like your spiritual influence has been slowly silenced with the passing of years, as if time reduced your value instead of refining your authority? But what if it's the opposite? What if your spiritual maturity is exactly what the world needs to hear right now? You've been called to live with purpose, with clarity, with boldness. That requires vigilance. It means stepping away from what drains your faith and leaning into what strengthens your connection with God. Ask yourself, who am I sharing my spiritual life with? What voices are shaping my decisions? What habits am I cultivating? Don't settle for passive aging. Choose a faith journey that grows stronger, wiser, and more eternity-focused than ever. If this message spoke to you, if it touched areas that may have been dormant, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want to keep growing, deepening your walk of faith, and learning how to guard your soul in this season, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notifications, and walk with us. There is so much more to live, to learn, and to awaken.